Hi, I'm Dr. Lili, and this is my Pocket Pediatrician. I want to start this conversation by saying that I don't make any money off of vaccinations. I work in pediatric emergency departments and pediatric urgent care, so I've actually never been paid to vaccinate a patient. A lot of times I hear people saying, well, you can't trust doctors because they make lots of money off vaccines, and they're going to be a biased source of information. Personally, I would probably be making more money if you didn't vaccinate your kids, because we have to do more workups on patients who aren't vaccinated. When children go into multi-system organ failure from influenza, or they wind up on ventilators from pertussis, then it's the emergency doctors and the critical care doctors who wind up working harder and making more money to save your children's lives. I have a lot of doctor friends. It's just kind of what happens when you spend 30,000 hours in clinical training. I've noticed that the ones who are the biggest supporters of vaccination are the doctors in pediatric critical care, pediatric emergency medicine, and pediatric infectious disease. We're the ones who are posting articles trying to raise awareness about vaccinations and how bad the consequences can be from not vaccinating your child. We're the ones who are awake at night thinking about the kids in the hospital who are fighting for their lives. So maybe it's time to listen to what we have to say. When else do you get to hear from someone who's trying to tell you something in the hopes that they don't earn your business? I know that if you have your heart set against vaccines, watching a 15-minute video is probably not going to change your mind about anything. I've had a lot of conversations about vaccines with a lot of my friends and acquaintances, and I know that I never changed anybody's mind in a 15-minute conversation. It always took several discussions, building trust, taking a lot of time, going over resources together. What I hope to do today is to share some valuable resources with you that will give you the building blocks so that you can be equipped to make the best decision for your child. Make sure you hit that little red subscribe button right down there so you don't miss out when the next video comes out as well.
When the doctor says my child has a condition, I'll learn more at my Pocket Pediatrician.
So I was at work on Monday night and I grabbed my phone to figure out a medication dose I was trying to calculate really quickly, and somehow a Facebook notification popped up on my phone. I feel like all my videos are involving something I see on social media, but this one stopped me in my tracks. A colleague had posted an article that made my blood run cold. Polio is back in the Western Hemisphere. We were busy with a lot of patients and I didn't have time to open the article or read it. But several hours later, once I got home and I laid down in bed to go to sleep and try to catch a couple hours before I had to get up with my kids the next morning, I couldn't help myself. I grabbed my phone, I unlocked it, and at that point, dozens of people had posted the same article. And my stomach twisted as I read about a little boy in Venezuela who had developed the acute onset of flaccid paralysis. Venezuela had successfully eradicated polio 30 years ago. I thought immediately about a very sweet professor I had in medical school. She had been paralyzed by polio as well and was wheelchair bound. She was an excellent teacher and I'll remember a lot about her, but one of the most important things was when she talked to us about vaccine preventable illness and how contracting polio as a child had affected her life. This was a few years before the big anti-vaccination movement that started in 2007. That was when Jenny McCarthy had her famous interview on Oprah about how vaccines had caused autism in her son. I was a new doctor at the time, still in residency, and all of a sudden, we were getting lots and lots of questions about vaccines, and people started refusing them. This wasn't entirely new territory for me. I had a childhood friend who didn't want to vaccinate her children either. She had read a book that had been published in 1985 promoting natural living, including raw unpasteurized milk, no sugar, and no vaccines. I'm totally on board with the no sugar, but the science behind the rest of it was a little bit suspect. The Jenny McCarthy interview catapulted the anti-vaccination movement into the spotlight, and now we're seeing the consequences. I've spent the last 11 years reading an almost constant barrage of anti-vaccination materials. When I have a parent come in and tell me that they've done their research, I want to know what they've been reading. It's definitely something that parents put a lot of thought into and are not taking lightly. When a newly pregnant mother goes online to figure out what she needs to know about having a baby, she's told to plan her nursery theme, figure out how she feels about vaccines, and design the perfect birth plan. It seems as if vaccines are now as much of a personal choice as whether or not she's going to have unicorns or a nautical theme for her nursery. I used to do a lot of work in other parts of the world, like India, Ghana, Liberia, Honduras, Ecuador. It seemed I would find exhausted women walking on foot, sometimes for 2 days or longer, just to bring their baby to a clinic so that they could get the required vaccines, hoping that their baby wouldn't become one of the under 5 mortality statistics that they were so used to seeing. To them, the thought of not getting vaccinated was just as foreign as the thought of having a unicorn-themed nursery. You see, those women who would walk for days in the blazing sun, often carrying more than one child, actually had an advantage when it comes to making the decision about whether or not to vaccinate your children. They didn't necessarily have stable housing or access to clean water, or sometimes even enough food for their families. What they did have was firsthand knowledge of what vaccine-preventable illnesses can do to a child. They had actually seen babies take their last breath after losing a battle with pertussis. They had witnessed children who had been paralyzed by polio begging in the streets. The sound of a mother's wail at losing her child was all too familiar to them. And so they made great sacrifices so that they could get their children to a clinic where they could actually receive the vaccines. Now, I'm not saying this to sound judgy or holier than thou. You see, when I was pregnant, I was probably a lot more like you. I lived in an air-conditioned house, I had internet access, I had excellent prenatal care and every resource I needed. I had a smartphone that beckoned me whenever I couldn't sleep because of my pregnancy. I went down that wormhole of worry with concerning articles in the middle of the night more than once. As a pediatrician who had actually witnessed the consequences of vaccine-preventable illnesses, this doesn't seem to make any sense. I shouldn't have been scared. I knew the truth about vaccines, but those articles are really, really scary. After reading article after article like that, I can totally understand how it seems like doing nothing and taking the passive response of not vaccinating your child seems like a much better decision. It's much easier to say I'll do nothing rather than inject something into your baby's skin that you think might actually harm them. The pictures of the baby surrounded by all the needles and vaccines that they would be given over the course of their first year of life made me wince. I remember holding my 2-month-old's tiny thighs and watching the nurse as she quickly injected the first vaccine, and I wondered if I had made the right decision. I knew he wouldn't get autism. Those studies had been disproved time after time after time. But I wondered if he might have some sort of adverse reaction, an allergic reaction, maybe even just a fever, anything. He cried for a few seconds, I nursed him quickly, and we went on about our day and nothing changed. I'm not telling you to say, well, my 4 children got vaccinated and everything turned out great. That would be just as silly as some of the studies that started this whole debate. I just want to let you know I understand where you're coming from as a mom. I know that every decision I make, whether it's to breastfeed or bottle feed, send my child to preschool or keep them home with me, or any of the other thousands of decisions I'm going to make as a mom, is something that I need to consider carefully. Just about every mom I know tends to doubt herself a little bit. That doubt leads to insecurity, and those insecurities lead to the mommy wars and all the arguments that take place on social media and even in person sometimes. A lot of times we're really stressing ourselves out about decisions that don't wind up making a big difference in our child's life. But deciding whether or not to vaccinate your child could be one of the most important decisions that you ever make as a mother. The question here is, why are vaccines so hotly contested? Parents Magazine recently ran an article called 11 Celebrity Parents Weigh In on Vaccines. I honestly don't know why anyone would ever make a medical decision based on what a celebrity parent decided to do, but apparently some people do. So if you need to know that somebody who can look amazing on a red carpet agrees with you, take a look at these smart moms. All of these women vaccinate their children, and actually many of them are advocates for vaccination, like Amanda Peet, whose daughter got pertussis as a baby. If we look back at where this all started, Andrew Wakefield is the person who really launched this whole anti-vaccination movement. He's a former physician in the United Kingdom. I was still in high school at the time, so I wasn't aware of all the details when it was happening. But basically, he took a sample of 12 children who he was treating for autism spectrum disorders and also gastrointestinal issues. He asked all the parents if they had noticed symptoms of autism before they had their MMR or if it had happened after they had the MMR, which is the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. Based on what these parents remembered, he actually published a study in The Lancet, which is a very respected journal, in 1998. He stated that the MMR vaccine caused autism and should be a cause of grave concern and further study. Since that time, it's been determined that he actually falsified those results. He's been stripped of his medical license, was found guilty of dishonesty and misconduct, and 10 of his 12 co-authors have come forward and testified that the results were actually falsified in that Lancet journal. The Lancet retracted the study in 2004. Wakefield, while he's not allowed to practice medicine anymore, is still around and active, having recently produced the movie Vaxxed, which he was trying to push on the public at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2016. The coordinators of the festival actually reviewed the science behind what he was saying and the claims of misconduct on his professionalism, and they actually withdrew the film from the festival. I have another video coming out soon that's going to explain how to do your research as a parent when you're trying to evaluate medical studies and know what's valuable and what isn't. I won't get into that right here, but I will say that even if he hadn't falsified his results, that was a poorly designed study with a very small sample size, and it wouldn't have been valid either way. Since Wakefield's original study in '98, multiple proposals have been made that maybe it wasn't the MMR specifically that caused autism. Maybe it was thimerosol, which is a preservative that used to be found in vaccines. Other people often suggest that we're just giving out too many vaccines. They say that when we were young, we didn't get as many vaccines. Perhaps we're overloading the immune system, which is causing neurological changes in children. In 2013, the American Academy of Pediatrics put together a really amazing publication. What they did was basically create a table summarizing every single study that had been done on vaccine safety all over the world. Compared with Wakefield's sample size of 12 patients, some of these studies included more than 500,000 patients. If you're truly concerned about vaccine safety, I strongly encourage you to take a look at this document. You can just read the summary of each of the 45 studies, or you can actually click on the links and read the original articles yourself and see what the science shows. I'm going to spare you the details of these exhaustive studies right here, but I really encourage you to go take a look at them for yourself and see what you think. Basically, there hasn't been a single study that's been able to link autism to any vaccination, preservative, or a number of vaccinations. If you're not sure, please check out autismspeaks.org. Click the link available on my website, in which they cite a very powerful study, which is a meta-analysis of over 1.2 million children. This analysis was able to show that vaccines don't cause autism and that the MMR may actually reduce the risk of autism in children. If any study had ever shown that vaccinations actually cause autism, don't you think autismspeaks.org would be out there shouting it from the rooftops? Instead, they're actually promoting vaccinations since their mission is to advocate for children with autism. Part of their advocacy is ensuring that children with autism don't die of vaccine-preventable illnesses. Now, as with anything in medicine, nothing is perfect. Vaccines definitely don't cause autism, but people do have adverse reactions to vaccines. Sometimes it can just be a little redness, tenderness, or swelling at the injection site. Sometimes you might get a fever, which means your body is mounting an immune response, which is actually good. And sometimes you wind up with a serious allergic reaction or rare condition as a result of a vaccine. The same is true for antibiotics, ADHD medications, and anything you put into your body, including food. Whenever your child gets a vaccination, you'll get a piece of paper stating all the known risks that are associated with that vaccine, as small or as unlikely as they may be. For example, the original rotavirus vaccine, called RotaShield, which is not used in the United States anymore, was thought to increase the risk of getting intussusception, which is a small bowel obstruction. It was removed from the market in 1999, and now we have a much safer version of the rotavirus vaccine to help protect our children against rotavirus, which can cause a severe and deadly form of diarrhea. The World Health Organization estimates that rotavirus actually kills about 215,000 children every year. The Center for Disease Control has VAERS, or the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. Any adverse reaction to a vaccine can be reported so that physicians, epidemiologists, and other scientists can work together to ensure that we have the safest vaccines possible for our children. Right now, on any vaccine, the risk of a serious allergic reaction is estimated to be about 1 in a million. That's much smaller than the risk for antibiotics and other medications that we give regularly without a thought. I'm only one of the thousands of pediatricians out there who have devoted our lives to improving the health of children. We honestly love children. We sometimes stay awake at night thinking about the best ways to treat your children. We'll humbly go to our colleagues and ask for advice about difficult cases. We miss time with our own families so that we can be there when your child needs us. We're working nights, weekends, holidays, and as far as I know, very few of us are in it for the money. We recommend vaccines because we've devoted years and years of our lives to studying medicine and reviewing scientific literature. We've read the studies, we understand the evidence, and we know that vaccines save lives. Most of us now have seen tiny babies fighting for their lives as they battle pertussis. When I was in medical school, I was told that I'd probably never have to worry about a case of epiglottitis thanks to the Hib vaccine. And I was told that I may never see an actual case of measles, but I have. Thanks to the polio vaccines developed in the 1950s and 60s, the last case of polio that originated in the United States was in 1979, and the last case of a traveler coming to the U.S. with polio was in 1993. Polio used to be one of the most feared diseases in the United States. It's highly infectious, and it causes permanent paralysis or death in most patients. As I've been following the story that happened in Venezuela, a few days later, it was reported to be a false alarm. The child actually tested negative for polio. I let out a huge sigh of relief and said a silent prayer that those doctors in Venezuela would be able to determine what was causing this boy's paralysis and help him. However, polio is still endemic in many countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. All it takes is one traveler to slip through the cracks. And if our vaccination rates aren't high enough to provide herd immunity, we could have a public health crisis on our hands. I have a whole lot more to say about vaccines, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Please ask them down below, and don't forget to hit that little red subscribe button in the bottom right so that you don't miss out on any new content. This is Dr. Lili with My Pocket Pediatrician. Thanks for stopping by.
When the doctor says my child has a condition, I'll learn more at My Pocket Pediatrician.